All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the last of the community engagement sessions for the MBTA communities legislation. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, so thanks to everybody for taking the time to come out. My name is Catherine Fierick. I'm the Director of Land Use and Economic Development for the town. And I'm going to be going over a couple of things in the beginning that I've said before, so it might be a repeat for you all, but for those who haven't yet joined in, I want to make sure that they understand the context of what we're doing tonight. I am wearing a mask tonight because I do have a cough from one of my kids, and I just don't want to spread it to you all. It's not COVID or anything. I just want to be respectful of everybody here. So the presentation, like I said, it's going to be about a 10-minute introduction, and it's going to be familiar to a lot of you. And then we're going to review the 3 scenarios from the last session. I'm going to provide an overview of each option's location again for everybody who's joining us today. The existing context, the pros and the cons that we discussed the last time around, any changes that may have taken place, unit count estimates, and then the impact analysis. We finally have the final pieces. As of today, it was one of those moments, but we got it in. So I'm very grateful to my peers on that. And then finally, we're going to spend about 15 minutes tonight just so that you can explore the options yourself. I have some hard copies of the impact analysis work. And we have 3 large maps of the 3 different options up here tonight. So we have some Post-it notes. We encourage you to go up, write any questions, comments, any lingering concerns that you have with any of these options up on the maps themselves. And then at the end, we'll regroup and we'll have some Q&A time for that. So what is MBTA communities? This is a law that was adopted in 2021, and it affects 177 communities within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that includes Foxborough. There are 3 different tiers of transit, and Foxborough belongs to the second most intensive tier of transit, which means that we have certain zoning requirements that we have to fulfill. Zoning is the structure that we use to decide what can be built in different locations in the town. So it's not a mandate to build, but it does allow for things to be built in certain areas with varying degrees of review and approval, and in this case, by right means they can build it with very limited review processes. So what's the role of town staff? Number 1 is to inform the residents of what's going on, what is Section 3A, what is MBTA communities, provide additional explanations or supplemental materials that are requested by residents, engaging you all through all these events. We've gotten a lot of tremendously good insight from these, so I really do appreciate all the residents that have come out. Compiling 2 possible districts that comply fully with the state regulations while incorporating your feedback through these sessions. And finally, you're going to have 2 options to consider and vote on at town meeting in November. So I want to make sure that there's that flexibility, just because not all residents are involved from the very beginning. So I did want to, from the start, have 2 different options that I took to town meeting. That way, residents have the opportunity to vote yes on the one, yes on the other, or no to both. So I do want to make that very clear. You retain the right at town meeting to vote no to either if neither one meets your needs, or you just, for any reason at all, you don't accept it. So what can happen if the town votes against a compliant district? There are a few changes since the last time that we spoke. For one thing, well, there's ineligibility for grants and a lack of consideration for other grants that are specifically mentioned in the legislation, as well as the guidelines prepared by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. There's also civil enforcement action by the AG's office, and a lot of you are hearing about that Milton court case. It's not going to be finished by the time we vote, unfortunately, but that's another possibility if we vote no. A new item that I've highlighted here is that there won't be an opportunity for congressional earmarks from the 4th District of Massachusetts. This was something that was kind of hinted at by the congressman about 2 months ago, and he has been saying it publicly since, that he really supports the legislation. He recognizes the need for housing, and if communities are not in compliance, he will not be considering earmarks only for federal funds. So earmarks are discretionary funds that you can spend in your congressional district. This does not have any bearing on typical federal grants. If I were to apply for an EPA grant to clean up a brownfield site, like an old contaminated factory, that's not going to be affected by this. But things that we specifically request from our congressman, we will not receive consideration for if we're not in compliance. So that's a big deal. It has affected a lot of what we've done with the Route 1 sewer project, for example. Another item that I've highlighted up here, it's not new from the last time, but it bears repeating again, is that Milton has had a Seaport Economic Council grant clawed back. That's not common. If you have a grant approved, typically it's approved, you do your work, you submit your reports, you close it out. Clawbacks mean that no matter where you are in the process, those funds could be yanked back. So we have a grant right now that's one of the list of discretionary grants that is at risk of being clawed back. It's the community planning grant that we're using to do our our master plan in the next year. So that's an open grant that is at risk. Again, we don't know if it's going to be affected or not. A lot of this stuff is still up in the air. The other grant that was outside of the list that has been affected in Milton is a community compact municipal fiber grant. So the community compact is kind of a flexible state program. You write up an agreement between yourself and the state, and you can spend, it's kind of a slush fund for certain areas that the state sees as priorities. One of those is fiber broadband access. So that was, it was approved in Milton under the condition that they regain compliance. So those are examples of the ways that grants can be affected that were not discussed at the last one and are not on the document that we've created. Yes.
Catherine, when you said that, you might have just answered my question. So, I mean, is it because Milton has basically told them they are not going to comply, that they pulled something back? Because technically they're not in compliance until the end of the year.
No, they are actually. So they're
okay.
considered a rapid transit community, which is one of the things that they're fighting is that allocation. But they were considered a rapid transit community, so they were in the first round of communities to comply. They have been out of compliance since the beginning of the year.
Okay.
So that's why. We're in the second tranche, so we are not out of compliance till the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
So haven't we already voted on this? Yes, we did. We voted at town meeting in May. The district that was outlined on the right received a no vote for a lot of different reasons. A lot of people wanted to wait and see. Unfortunately, we aren't any closer with the Milton case, really. But that doesn't mean that the law is waived. It's still, my responsibility to try to get us into compliance if it's possible. But again, it's up to you all, the residents, ultimately at the end of the day. So we're at the very end of the community engagement process, which is exciting, but it also feels like it went by too quickly to me. This is the 5th of the public engagement sessions. We're trying to finalize the resident feedback now into these 3 different options to try to bring 2 of them to town meeting. We've done all the background work now. We've done all the research. So this meeting and a social media survey and an additional information video, because we were requested to bring town council back. He's been unavailable, unfortunately, but we do want to get a recorded Q&A session, and we'll reach out for questions via, the website, social media, any way that we can to try to get some really good information out to residents that will be recorded and shown on cable access. So I'll go through the formula just briefly, because we've been through it before. We did most of the work when it comes to the geographical determinations already. But because we are a commuter rail community, the following applies to us. We need to find a land area of 50 acres, at least 40% of which is located within a half mile of the Foxborough MBTA commuter rail station. I'm going to clarify that because a lot of people think it might be applicable as well to the Mansfield station, because we are within that half mile radius. It has to be the Foxborough station. The unit capacity is 1,152 new units. That doesn't mean that all 1,152 units have to be built. There are ways that we can mitigate. We've already talked about that. Zoning over already built structures that are unlikely to change anytime soon. Zoning over existing multifamily areas so that there's only that delta, that difference of units between what's already there and what a little bit more density might provide. So there are ways that you can mitigate these issues. The district can be layered over the existing uses, not wetlands, rivers, or public infrastructure. And there can't be restrictions on resident age or unit size or number of bedrooms. What's not required in the legislation? Affordability. If you have it, it has to be capped at 10%. Any requirements that units must be built or that communities have to pay for the construction of the new units. And finally, no restrictions against allowing other types of development such as commercial or mixed use within the district by right as well. So let's get to the three models again. You've seen all of these at this point in time. I did have to tweak the third one, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. The first one is to maximize economic development, by which I mean the dollars that are spent within the community. Each one of those dollars can lead to building permit fees. Each one of those dollars can lead to property tax returns. There is a strong market argument for locating additional consumers by the existing retail base that's at Patriot Place. We have a couple of pros and cons listed here that we teased out in the last several sessions. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I think that the most important one is that there are additional tax revenues, building permit fees. The cons, there's a lot of surface lots here, so that's a little bit easier to develop than existing buildings. So you are opening yourself up to a less gradual development in this case. It could be kind of all at once. I'm not going to say all at once, but it could be all in a very short amount of time if it is developed. Also, because it's by right, you lose out on some of the tools that we often use to control development. There are often agreements that are reached between developers and municipalities that help to guide how these types of projects look and feel and operate. Because this legislation requires by right zoning, that means that we lose some of those controls. Finally, the con that I'm going to mention as well is that it concentrates growth in one school district. So that can place an undue burden on an already at capacity school district within the town. Using the build-out analysis, what I did was I determined the massing that can take place here. On the surface lots themselves, there's enough room at most for 11 new buildings averaging 1.5 acres each. That sounds really huge, but because of the cap on density at 20 to 21 units per acre, 20 in this case, you come out to about 30 units per acre. So it's not a lot of units, despite the fact that it's a huge amount of land. There also, in this moderate build-out scenario, I estimate that 2 buildings will be redeveloped within the existing footprint of Patriot Place at 1.25 acres each. That kind of allows for either the big one that has the movie theater at the end. That one's about 2.5 acres itself, or a couple of the smaller buildings along the corridor. The average housing unit, I chose 1,200 square feet. That's huge, but because we're allowing up to 3 stories, the square footage can actually be even higher than that. So really, with the density cap on this, you're looking at probably like 3 stories absolute max, and those are large units. And each building, like I said, is limited to 20 to 21 housing units per acre. And the hotel and medical office parking are going to remain undeveloped. The reason I believe that that's going to be the case is because there are existing agreements in place between the Craft Group and their tenants. They can't easily back out of those agreements. They would have to replace the parking. It's very expensive and challenging to do so, particularly if they build parking underground to allow for the development of any lots above. So, onto the impact analysis. I only did the moderate build when it came to revenues just because it's a busy time of year for our assessor's office, and they've been working on the tax rates for the next year. So I tried to lay off my requests to them. So I only did the revenue portion for the moderate build. But given those assumptions that I just mapped out for you in the build-out analysis, you can expect to receive annual property taxes of over $2 million from the 13 buildings that we just discussed. Building permit fees are a one-time deal. So building permit fees only come once, but they can be very high for buildings of this type. When I worked out the math here, we're looking at between $800,000 and $1 million. Now, there's a comparable that's actually in our hands right now, and that's Walnut Knoll. The second building at Walnut Knoll was, looking at my note here, $350,000 in building permits alone for a little over half an acre project. So these are really conservative estimates on the building permit revenues. And then, of course, we went through the schools and the police last time around. I did have an opportunity to talk to the fire department since then. So you'll see that a lot of these numbers are static across all of the scenarios. Reason being that the build-out is within the realm of our 2028 staffing plan for the fire department. which recommends that they get to 10 firefighters and paramedics per shift for 4 shifts. So we're 4 short of that right now. It's kind of an immediate need to get up to that point, but the additional growth from these scenarios could be absorbed in that. That said, I have a double asterisk on the highest 2 build scenarios because those could trigger a need for a new fire substation. That's not certain. We don't have a threshold in mind right now. It's something that you all need to take into consideration when you're making your decisions. It could be very expensive, but at the same time, there's a net annual surplus of $672,000 each year from this build-out scenario. So that could be enough to cover most, if not all, of the bond financing on a new building of that sort. I couldn't tell you that to be clear, because I don't know how much it would cost. But it's something for you all to keep in mind. And I do apologize, I'm kind of losing my voice as we go. The second option is the minimize community impact within the ratio option. And this forces incremental growth within Patriot Place and the surrounding area. There is no low-hanging fruit at all in this map. All of it would be challenging and very expensive to build. Probably the easiest things to do would be if the field house were to be abandoned at some point, or if they were to structure parking for the pavilion, which is just south of the medical office parking. That triangular piece of medical office parking will probably remain in perpetuity because that's ADA accessible. It's designed for visitors to the medical center that need quicker access, and it's probably contractually obligated. So I don't believe the practice fields are going to be touched because we're actually reviewing a permit. Well, we granted approval of a project to do a new training facility, which covers half of one of those training fields. And they do need the redundancy because players wear out the turf while they practice. So that's unlikely. Field house might happen, not anytime soon. That parking by the pavilion might happen, but it would be very expensive. And then there's the incremental growth over Patriot Place itself. So the moderate build-out scenario includes 5 new buildings over the surface lots, which is the absolute max that you could do, and as well over the field house. And then 2 redeveloped buildings within the existing footprint of Patriot Place. I've estimated that 25% of building square footage would be retail on the first floor. And the reason I choose 25% through all of this is because it's understood that with buildings like this in our market, you're going to need podium-style parking, because suburban-style development projects need that additional parking capacity. You can't build one-to-one parking ratios. They need to build it in. So a lot of the other factors remain the same as the last analysis, like the average housing unit size, the buildings per acre. In this case, it's 21. And assuming that the hotel and the ADA medical office lot remain undeveloped. So the impact analysis here, revenues that we can expect annually from this build-out scenario are a little over 1.2 million. Building permit fees range from, on the low end, because I think this is a very challenging place to develop at all, we could expect a little over $100,000 if like just a couple of those buildings are built, up to a max of a little under 600,000. And again, we went through the schools and the police, but not the fire. Like I said, it's consistent. They can absorb the low end of this because it's only like 60 units or something like that, 40, I think. And then, so the net surplus for option 2 is $19,000. So that would be what's returned to the town. Though, again, you have that potential need for redistricting or capacity expansion in the schools. So that could be either a messy political process or it could be an expensive capital project. So those are things to keep in mind. Finally, the sub-district model. We discussed this last time around. There were some surprises for me in this one. I did have to tweak it a little bit just because the ratios came off. So I had to make sure that we had the 50% in Patriot Place. So I carved a bit out of the lodge. That did increase the density, but not by a lot. And when it comes to buildable area, it really didn't make a dent on the unit count. If you look for the lodge, there is a forested area that's right on the frontage, and we do need frontage in our district, right here. That is technically buildable, however, there's topographical challenges. There's like a cliff within the forests, and it's right in the middle of the roundabout as well. So it's not unbuildable potentially, but I don't think that it's a very desirable spot to build, and it wouldn't yield too many units just because of parking requirements and the location itself. So the pros to this: it spreads new growth across 3 different school districts. It limits development opportunity within the radius to just over Patriot Place's built environment itself, more or less. And the sub-districts are already in multifamily areas, so it's not out of context for where it is. The cons: they're more abutters because you've got different parcels in different parts of the town. And that also leads to different development contexts. And finally, you do require frontage. That was a comment they gave us in the last go-around. So that does open some undeveloped acreage, but again, like I said, topography is another limiting factor there. The build-out analysis for this is the 2 redeveloped buildings within the existing footprint of Patriot Place. There are no surface lots in this model that I think are even eligible to be redeveloped because, again, they're attached to the medical office building and the hotel. So it would be an expensive rebuild, and it would be incremental, and it would be on the existing footprint of what's already there. 25% of the square footage is going to be retail, like I said before, because of the podium-style parking. 4 new multifamily-only buildings located in the sub-districts. We already had to write the articles on this, and the way that we wrote it was that there are 2 different articles. And the one that addresses the sub-district model limits any kind of commercial growth to only Patriot Place. It's only multifamily residential allowed on these 2 sub-districts. We call them smart growth multifamily districts because that's the language within the MBTA communities legislation. And again, a lot of the other assumptions pretty much stay the same. The impact analysis here was surprising to me. And it's mainly because of the lack of commercial, to be honest with you. So the commercial is what usually makes mixed-use development projects a net positive for the budgets of municipalities. And because you had 4 buildings that are assumed to be multifamily only, which again probably won't be built, but that's the way we're modeling it, you actually had a net cost to the town here of a little over $200,000 a year. Another thing that I'll mention is that the student count is probably going to be higher in the sub-district model because this is a more appealing place for families to live than right by the stadium. We're using the same multiplier throughout all the scenarios, which is the average number of students between the Lodge and the Sylvan. They're both about the same. It's about, I think, 0.14 students per unit, which isn't high, but I think it's higher in the Lodge and the Sylvan than it will be in Patriot Place. So because of the fact that, we're assuming a need for teachers and paraprofessionals based off the IGO district, it could be that we're making assumptions in the more expensive direction on this model than in the others. But we don't know that for sure. We're being safe and we're being conservative in our estimates. But we do believe that we'll get approximately $721,000 a year in new property taxes, given the build-out that I just went through with you all. Again, those building permit fees, they're a one hit, so you can't count on them into the future, but they range from $121,000 to about $450,000. And then the total expenses in the moderate build scenario is $927,000. So we, again, like I said, there's actually net cost annually to this one, which surprised me a little bit. But like I said, it could be due to the lack of calculation for the 2 different school districts. They might have unknown capacity to me, whereas we know that the IGO district is full. So I just put side by side all the moderate build scenarios so that you can see what we believe they're going to cost us and what we believe the revenues are going to be. And the big unknowns here that I can't really predict in this exercise are the need for a redistricting or capacity expansion of the IGO school, and that could be a huge expense. It could also just not be a huge expense, but be a very messy political process. And the second piece is the potential need for a new fire substation. The chief isn't super concerned about that, but I said, well, why don't we just throw it in if like the unit count is over 600 or something like that? And he said, yeah, that's fair, that it might yield a need for that if it's above 600,000. So these are just, it's impossible to know exactly what the impact is, but I do want you all to be aware that we are thinking about it. We're doing our best to get the numbers together, to be realistic in our estimates, and to give you all at least some information that you can chew on. And where I was surprised, at least, I want you to know, like, I've already thought about, like, what could I have gotten wrong here that led to this, if indeed it's wrong. So the next steps are going to be that we're going to release a survey tomorrow for people who haven't taken part in these meetings. A lot of people have other obligations. They might have work conflicts. We want to give other people an opportunity to review some of the materials. We'll have like a diagram that just shows the maps, the pros and cons, and just a brief impact analysis piece. And then they can just click on the picture basically on the internet and vote for their preferred district. We're going to take a call at the end of this session too for like, what's your number one preference from the three that we've gone over. But like we're gonna keep that survey open till next Thursday. That way we can get as much participation as we can. The town council and I will work with Foxborough Cable Access to make sure that we get a recorded information session, and we'll make sure that people have an opportunity to send us questions in advance of that. So that will probably be in about a week and a half because he's out of town right now. And then finally, the town meeting is in November 18th. So please come, please vote, please make your preferences, awarenesses known, whether you are comfortable voting for any of these, or if you want to vote no, I highly encourage you to show up, exercise your civic duty. The next part of this, I'm going to take some questions first, but after I take questions, we're going to shut the mics off so we don't catch conversation, because I want you to feel comfortable doing this. But we have some Post-it notes, and we want you to just explore the maps up here. I have printouts of the impact analysis and each of the options up on the table here that you're welcome to take with you tonight. But definitely look them over now. Write any questions, comments. I love this, I hate this, I'm confused by this. I want to hear all of it. Write it down here. We'll try to address them at the end, but I want to give you all 15 minutes or so just to go up to make yourself aware of and explore these options. Are there any questions before we do that? Sure.
I have a question. Rafaela Feinstein, Stanischew. So we have two articles in the warrant. So does option 3 correspond to Article 6? And I mean, how are they for the public's adults?
Sure.
3 options there, but there are 2 different articles.
Sure. So the question was that there are 2 different articles, but the 3 different options, which articles correspond with which options? Excellent question. Yes, Article 6, which mentions the smart growth multifamily districts, corresponds to option 3. If we get through the whole process, like I've already discussed it with the moderator, and the way he wants to approach it is to open conversation on the first article, but then discuss both options because they're so closely tied together. And then we'll take a vote on the first one. If that's a yay, it'll be, highly encouraged, vote no on the second one because we don't want to vote yay on both, right? So that's the way that we're going to address it at town meeting. But there's one article that mentions only the Patriot Place vicinity, and there's one article that mentions multifamily smart growth subdistricts. And that corresponds with the option that overlays on top of existing multifamily areas. Thank you.
I'm not really good with maps. Where exactly on option 3 could they build? Because it doesn't look like there's really anywhere they could build.
The question is, where on option 3 could the owners build? Because it doesn't look like there's a lot of room to build. So I agree with you. I don't think that it's very buildable. Options 2 and 3 would be incredibly expensive to build anything on, and I don't think that there's a financial benefit in doing so, to be perfectly honest. Like I've worked with big development deals for a long time now. So on option 3 specifically, the areas that I believe are the, quote, lowest hanging fruit would be if they were ever to decide to replace the theater within Patriot Place because that's the largest building, and it has the wind tunnel that is defunct. And then they could also build on top of the existing storefronts, potentially. Down in the sub-districts, there is some acreage that is undeveloped. They could potentially expand what's already there, but there are a couple of giant ridges there, which make development very expensive and challenging and contextually inappropriate. They probably wouldn't get the kind of revenue out of it that they'd want to. Those areas I'll point to, but I'm going to step away from the mic, so here. The area on the bottom is about, I think it's 1.6 acres. The area to the left is about 3 acres. But again, there are topographical challenges, and I don't think all of it's developable.
Thank you.
How do we eliminate the train station?
The question is, how do we eliminate the train station? That has been asked.
Problem, isn't it? Just
Right, that has been asked before. That's not a town function, unfortunately. The MBTA did that after they commissioned a year-long study in December, I think it was October, November of '22, something like that. But they got ridership higher than what they were seeking as their gauge to make it a full commuter rail station.
Anybody taking that train? This is-
Yeah, Mark Elfman, Board of Selectmen, the train station isn't going anywhere. We checked with the MBTA. No way.
And
But we had that question about a month ago.
yeah, for folks at home, Mr. Elfman just made the comment that we did check with the MBTA. They said, no, the station's going to remain.
Michelle Paluzzi, 4 Tucker Lane. This is a multi-part question. So regarding option 3, I know at the last meeting you stated that might be the most beneficial for Foxborough to move forward with. Regarding the tweaks that you made, do you still feel that way? Also, you're stating that there's a lot of unbuildable or undesirable land to build on there, so that might not be the best option for somebody to develop on. If we go forward with this to the state and say, you know what, as a town, we're in compliance, we're doing what we need to do, but we're coming to you with option 3. They're locked into that. They can't come back to us and say, oh, well, that's great, thanks for, being in compliance, but we're not in agreement with option 3, we want option 1 or 2. And that's my fear. Like, I feel like the town can drive the bus on this and still meet all our needs financially and such, but if we go forward with the option that's really truly best for the town, that's not so much best for a developer or the state. Is the state gonna turn around and say, oh, well, we're gonna pull the rug out from under our feet
Sure.
and do what they wanna do anyways?
So-
That's my first question, ma'am. So my second point is, with option 1 or 2, I think even though you're talking about revenue that's coming in, we're still not talking about the issue that there are games, there's Coldplay coming, there's the World Cup coming, and you're gonna have people living in this vicinity that are not gonna be wanting to use Route 1 to come in and out. And I think as a town, even though I know Foxborough has to say when it comes to the streets and such, that's gonna be a huge issue, and that is gonna be brought up down the line, when people are gonna be complaining about how are they gonna get in and out of their apartments. Is that gonna mean going through Pine Street or building something onto Cross Street? So I don't think, even though I appreciate everything you're presenting, and I think you're doing a great job, I just don't think it's as black and white, short term, without looking at the long term, range of issues that can come up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are great questions. So I'll go back to the start, and if I forget anything, please remind me. So the first question was, at the last session, I believed that option 3 would be the most beneficial to the town. Do I still hold that view? I don't know. The numbers are telling me no, but again, I think that options 2 and 3 are equally challenging to build. So I don't think that if your goal is to reduce the impact as much as possible, either option 2 or 3 is solid. So as much as the numbers might state that, I don't think that it's going to get built to begin with. So I couldn't tell you myself. Like, if I'm going just by the numbers, I'd probably prefer option 2, to be honest. For the economic impact to the retail, I would probably go for option 2. But again, option 3 remains, and the burden on the school district cannot be dismissed out of hand. The second question was, can the state come back to us if we approve an option like option 3 and it's in compliance? Can they come back to us and say, we don't like it, you have to do it again? No, if it's in compliance, it's in compliance. I have a similar fear, so I did actually request that EOHLC review whatever two I send to town meeting, just to make sure that, like, I've got every single button buttoned. And they said that, yes, they'd do that for me. So I'm going to send them in advance, whichever two models come out of the final engagement process through tonight and the survey that we're going to send out. And they're going to tell me if there are any issues, any problems, any red flags, and I will share those at town meeting if there's anything that comes up. I'm really certain that these are compliant, but because it's a really cumbersome piece of legislation, I do want that piece of assurance. But as long as it's compliant, they can't say anything. The third question was regarding the impact to traffic along Route 1, that we're getting potentially a number of new residents that are going to at least lobby for access to Cross Road and other surrounding streets that right now enjoy a little more privacy and quiet. Anything that's built here would have to go through a site review process, and we'd have to know in advance where the traffic is going. As of now, Cross Street isn't public from the stadium area itself. We would very much stand opposed to opening it. And I believe we have that control. Yeah, so that's something that we as a town can control and say, no, we can allow that to not happen, to prevent the roads that are currently closed to traffic from these big events to remain closed, even to the new residents.
Yeah, I was just using Cross Street as an example, but I think thinking that family's gonna move in here because there's a T station is unrealistic. That the commuter rail is not gonna be the means of transportation that the majority of people who move in there are gonna be utilizing.
So the comment is that that the T is not going to probably be the main means of transportation. The developers I've spoken with in my career would agree with you. In a market like this, probably they're going to be looking at parking ratios over 1.4 spaces per unit, with the assumption that there's going to be probably up to 2 vehicles per unit. So yes, you're right. But the good news is Route 1 is built to absorb all of that concert and game day traffic. So it is overbuilt for what it is. But I understand your concerns about they're going to find the quieter streets. They're going to find the ways to get around it. Any other questions before we go into the, yes?
So, Stephanie McGowan, 19 Rose Lane. So Catherine, why you say you changed, you told us why you changed your mind, but is it strictly, like you're saying the numbers, so now this gives a cost to the town, option 3.
Mm-hmm.
But is that cost only if what could be built was built?
Yes.
Number one, so it could be no cost to the town, and that number, that's all based on if what could be built got built.
Right.
And you're also saying it's not, a lot of it isn't buildable, or it's someone gonna come in and spend a ton of money to build something that they may not get their money back from, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing, I would say off to Michelle's point, what I would say is, it's not really a desirable place to live because you're living right next to a stadium. So I think with that being said, you may have developers wondering if they make that investment that people are gonna buy there. And right now, I mean, like you said, we allow residents, they can't stop a resident from getting to their home. So if you're, we close streets down, but if you're a resident and that you need to go down that street to get to your home, they have to let you do that. But I still don't think that it's gonna have to be desirable for a builder to, he's gonna have to say, are people gonna buy this? And I mean, myself, maybe if I was single and I was going to take the T and not worry about driving around, it might be somewhere where you wanna live, but if you're moving in with a family, I don't really think it's a desirable place to live. So I think that also helps us on that part. We've complied, but we don't have a builder to come in
Right.
and
Yeah.
build something.
So just so I can rephrase for people that are listening at home, the first part of the question was, my changing my mind potentially to option 2 rather than 3 as what I would recommend as a planner. Was it purely dollars and cents, and is that dependent on whether or not it actually gets built? Yes, it's purely because of the dollars and cents, and I doubt that either option 2 or 3 are all that buildable. I think it's something where a developer might dip their toe in the water and see if there's enough money in it, but they're going to be looking really closely at absorption rates, which means once you build a new structure, how long does it take until you get up to 85 or 90% occupancy? Really, in this market right now, they're looking at like 30 days or less in most places because we're in such a housing shortage. If it's more than that, then they'll know that it's not really a good area to build, and they will stop. Given the very low density rates that we have here, 30 units over a 1.5 acre is like nothing. Where I live, there's in Attleboro, there's a building that was just constructed a few years ago on 1.5 acres that has 131 units right by the train station. Different context, obviously. That's a 5-story building, but you're looking at a very low density is my point. And if you want to build podium-style parking, and if you want an elevator, you're looking at $20 million for buildings that are of the scale of Patriot Place. Will 20 to 30 units really make it work? I don't think so. Like, financially, I don't see it happening. Unless these are really super deluxe units, which is a possibility, that they're only rented for game days and events. But it all depends on what's actually feasible, and I don't know what is. Yes?
So I just have a question. Could you clarify for me? I know some of these units, we're going to get some revenue from taxes, according to that. But is enough of that money going to be sufficient for like the school system?
Yes.
The police, the fire? We're going to have to add new stations. We're going to have to hire more teachers, expand on the schools. Where's all that money coming from? Is that going to reflect again back on us for paying more taxes?
No. So that was why I went through the impact analysis piece. I sat down with each department head and I asked them, like, how many more units can you absorb at present capacity? How many more would you need if, say, it was 200 new units? How about 600 units? How about 800 units? And then you can see kind of the scaling. So the school expense is based on new students, and that number is based off of how many students are living at the Lodge and the Sylvan, which are larger multifamily units. And like I said, I think that number's high for this area. But you can see that that in the sub-district model, it's a little over 350,000. In the low impact model, because there are more units, it's about 550. And then the economic development one, it's 950,000. So that cost to provide the school services increases. There are a couple things that I don't know how much they'll cost. I don't know when they're going to be necessary. And I mentioned those already with the school redistricting or expansion, which only affects the 2 in radius options and really barely with the low impact option. It's like, he said possibly at 600 or 60 new students, and we're looking at like 61 in that option. So, and again, like I said, I think the numbers are high. And then the fire substation, like I said, the chief isn't worried about it, but he said that one might be necessary if the unit counts over 600. It would be something they'd have to reanalyze at that point. So that's what those asterisks are, but the rest of it in terms of operational expenses year to year, the non-capital expenses, those we've already thought through.
The only concern I have is, I know we just passed a bill for 3 new things at the last town meeting, but now come 2 years from now, they're gonna come back and say, well, we have to expand the school, or we have to add, this. Now they're gonna raise our taxes again, like they just did here, and that's just the main concern. Are we gonna have enough money from those units to support any of that without affecting the residents that are already gonna have an increase in the next tax payment that we're gonna get? Probably, I don't know how much, but to approve what we just approved.
Sure.
I mean, this is not necessarily now, but maybe like 2, 3, 5 years from now, they're gonna come back and say, okay, we have to, do a new school or whatever it is that they have to do.
Sure. Yeah, so the question was about like whether or not we, for now we might be okay, but 5 years from now, will this kick in additional expenses? Like I said, we've discussed the capital costs. And the big one to look at is the schools, because the school district that is served by the area within the radius is at capacity. It's very tight. They could probably absorb a couple of new students, but it would be very tight. So you are looking at a situation where you might need a school redistricting or expansion. And that could be a near-term thing. But even without these units being built, that you're very much at risk of that, just through organic growth.
Oh, if you build it, they will come.
That's
There you go.
also true.
And I'm telling you right now, you know, if you give Kraft something, he's gonna do it. Kraft does nothing for this town.
So are these defined as affordable
No.
housing units? So these could be luxury units. Would they be purchased or would they be rentals? Because rentals don't pay, you know, property tax, which is a huge thing.
So the question was, are these units affordable? The answer is no. The legislation does not require affordability. If you do require it, it's capped at 10% of units. The second question was whether these are for sale units or rentals. I would make a correction that yes, property taxes are absolutely paid on rentals. And to be honest with you, when I worked with our assessor, we ran both, whether they were condos or rental properties. I went with the rental cost because it was lower in terms of per building cost, but not by a lot. To be honest with you, we're looking at like $250,000 in difference at a pretty big scale, like 10 million. So, I'm not really worried about the whether they're for rent or for purchase. They could very well be condos. Zoning doesn't control that. We just allow for multifamily housing, whether they're for sale units or rentals. We don't control.
I have another question. When we started this whole conversation, we mentioned that the apartments that we were building would be market price,
Mhm.
market rate. But in the purpose, in the warrant, purpose 3, it says that we are providing affordable housing by providing housing opportunities for low and middle income families or households.
Right, yeah.
How did that change?
So, yeah, that's...
Put it in there.
Yeah, I noticed that the other day, and it's something that I need to address, because I'm not sure what I can do at this point, because I'm just new to town meeting. That was legacy language from the last time that the MBTA communities was voted on, and I just didn't catch it. There is an affordability piece in there. It's not, we don't need to have it, and I went through that analysis at the last meeting, that we have a capacity before 40B becomes an issue, well in excess of the units that even at the high end here. Yep,
That's why I'm asking, because I thought.
yeah.
On that same note, you did say that we don't have to have the low-income affordability ones, but you said that if it's once it's out of our hands as a town, the developer themselves can do affordable housing if that's what they choose?
So the question was whether or not, once it's out of the town's hands, whether affordable housing can be put there or not. So, yes is the short term, because low-income housing can be put anywhere.
Right.
It's just a matter of whether you can get either the tax credits up front to subsidize it, or you use the vouchers to subsidize rents individually. Low-income housing can go anywhere. So there isn't like a hold that we can put on it necessarily to prevent any kind of affordable housing, but market conditions would probably prevent that in absence of a requirement of affordability, just in this location. And again, crystal ball stuff, I can't say that for sure, but market conditions, in my experience, would not allow for affordability to just organically happen here.
We'll talk about the schools. Part of the reason why, you know, I haven't made up my mind yet. I'm like a lot of people, I'm trying to get all the info. But the talk about the schools, the biggest concern on my mind, that Taylor School is up next. If we don't comply, you have to remember, the borough school cost us $34 million. When the state, when they get to you to help, they pick up half of that. So the state kicked in $17 million. Now the borough was, what, 3 years ago? Oh, 3 years ago? So a couple of things. If we anticipate where some of the building could happen, I'm not 100% sure. I think the Taylor School, they've talked about renovation, not adding on. I've heard a lot of people have asked, oh, now they're going to add on like they did at the borough. I don't know yes or no. The borough add-on was specifically because the whole special needs kids went over there. That's why that was added on. They were at the other schools, now they're all at the borough. But and I don't know the numbers, but if it was $34 million then, we know, you know, and those numbers were coming in before COVID for building. So I'm just gonna throw a $40 million number out, and I don't even know if that's the exact number. If we don't comply, the school has to be renovated. Okay, and that has to be voted at town meeting, but we know how that goes. Every family in the Taylor district will be at town meeting because that's their school, and they're the last one to have a renovation. So if we're not in compliance, and that goes to town meeting, the town is going to be paying, I'm just throwing a guess number, $40 million instead of $20 million. So, you know, and I'm not trying to talk anybody into complying, but we have to realize that it's not just little grant, you know, grants for a study for something that isn't, you know, it's nice to have, because if we have plans for the town, it's nice to get these grants, but that school is going to be done at some point, and that's a big nut that we would lose if we don't comply. You know, we just to keep that in the back of your mind. Not trying to make your decision, but you have to remember that's a lot. That's not a small grant. That's a lot of money coming into the town.
Right. So I do want to make sure that people have a chance to explore the options while we're still here tonight. So if it's all right with you, I'd like to just pass out some Post-it notes and some pens. Please grab the impact analysis stuff and the maps and the build-out stuff, because I do want you all to be able to review that here and at home later. And then we'll see you back here in about, I'd say 10 minutes probably. I do want to wrap up really quick with just a voice vote. We've lost several people, and that's fine, because we're still going to be reaching out via social media and on our website and everything like that to make sure that people can weigh in. But I just want to do a very quick, voice vote to see where people are in the room in terms of if you had to choose one of these options, which one would it be? So I'm gonna ask you to raise your hands for the option that is least offensive to you. I'll put it that way. How many for option one?
Are we gonna have a no vote, like no option?
Well, I'm just gonna ask for yes, just so I know where the room is, you know?
So I don't like any of them, so I don't.
No, oh yeah, we can do like a general no vote, that's fine. Option two. Hands for option two? Hands for option three? Okay, and hands for no vote. All right. All right, fair enough. Thank you all for coming and thanks for participating. Have a good night.
Will the no vote be an option when you send out
Yep.
that survey? Like none of the above?
I can, but I mean, I don't think that would help me very much, because I'm trying to get to a point where like I present the least offensive options to town meeting, and if I give people a no vote, then I'm just cutting out their vote entirely, you know what I mean? I don't want to do that.
Hey, Catherine, right? I don't know if this is fair or not. I mean, obviously, we know most people in town are no.
Mhm.
But would you guys pick, say you were forced to pick one of the three, would you at least raise your hand now? Because she needs to know which one she's going to put before town. You can still vote no at town meeting.
Right. This is obviously not an enforceable
Well,
vote
that's
right
what I'm thinking. That's kind of what you're asking us to
Yes.
do. What people that are here, which one would you prefer? Do you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean you have to vote for it.
least offensive.
Yeah,
Offensive with number three, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
we'll
will you guys just vote for which one you would pick if you had to? That
Okay.
doesn't mean you have to at town meeting. You can still vote no for the article, but the one thing she needs to know is what do you put, because guess what? You guys didn't give her any help with which one. So somewhere down the line, if other people are saying, well, it's one, that's the worst one. And that one will go to town meeting, and you don't know how people are going to vote
And
at
if
town
there's
meeting.
and if there's no chance of it passing
You
at
know what I
town
mean?
meeting, I feel like that's a lost
I'm not
opportunity.
trying to, I'm not trying to have people to vote yes for it, but she needs to know which one
She just wants a choice to present to town.
to present.
Right.
Exactly.
But we're gonna
Thank
be
you.
on camera.
Can I just ask a really quick question?
Sure.
Just to follow up something Stephanie had said. Just regarding the schools, because I don't, if
understand
this
this.
vote's gonna happen, I don't want it to be based, fair-based by any means. And I understand the 20 million from the school aspect regarding the Taylor, but is that some way extortion to the point where these are two totally different issues? That's a school issue, and that shouldn't be, those monies should be coming regardless of whether or not this passes or we are in compliance or not?
All I can,
Would that be for the town to turn around and be like, listen, you're having a temper tantrum because you didn't get your way and you're withholding these funds?
it would be a very expensive retort, but yes. The question was about whether or not this could be seen as extortion of the state holding school funding away from us that might be necessary to make repairs that are needed in the near future. I won't use the term extortion just because I'm in my professional role with my professional hat. What I will say is that that's Milton and the state are duking it out over just those types of reasons right now. And we'll see what the courts decide on that. But unfortunately, we're not going to have that information to vote on by town meeting.
Just because I don't think this vote should be fair-based. And I know, and then that's a big fear, not for me because I don't have younger children in the schools anymore, but anybody in that Taylor district.
Sure.
That would get them out voting for, not for the correct reasons. Because
Sure.
it is two totally different issues, but I didn't mean to.
It could be two different issues, but I mean, you have to take the wide view of what are the possible consequences. I mean, there are plenty of remedies that the state could come up with, or the courts could come up with, that are beyond the scope of anything that we know. They could assign a trustee to just design the district for non-compliant communities, rather than allowing the towns any ability to vote it in, like there are all kinds of remedies that are possible that we just don't know about. So I don't think that fear is necessarily, it's not fear so much as just being aware that there's a lot up in the air right now. And there's a lot that could materially affect tax rates and services and all kinds of stuff. So
Catherine, John, we were having like a little side conversation. He brought up, so the state awarded us 4-point-something million for the lights that are gonna be at Walnut Street. Now, obviously, that hasn't been started yet. Is that something they could pull back? Do you know if that's one of those types of grants, or?
it is. So the question was about the lights near the Walnut Street project and whether that could be an affected grant. I believe that was a MassWorks grant. I'm just going to open up my document that Paige gave me really quickly to find that. But yeah, MassWorks. Yeah, $4 million for the Walnut Street project in fiscal year '23. So yeah, that's a grant that's open right now that could potentially be at risk of clawback.
Yeah. And that was something that a lot of people had talked about for a long time. And then it kind of all came together because we were going to do the senior housing there. And that's it's a tough intersection there. And, I don't know if the town had the money to do it themselves, but obviously then they applied for the grant. I mean, that's a lot of money too, $4 million. Now, would the town go forward with it without the grant? I don't know, probably with.
Well, it's under construction, so I don't think we've got a choice at this point.
Yeah, but.
More than 140 then?
Yeah. But I mean, that's, like I said, it isn't, I can say it. I'm here as a resident, not in capacity, right? It is kind of extortion, but the problem is they can do it.
That's what government does, right?
But that's a state road, could they, I mean, the town wouldn't spend.
They don't have to put a light there.
All right, I do have to wrap it up because we are 10 minutes over, but
Can we
can
take
stay.
one more vote, just so you know?
yeah, sure. One more vote. All right. So option 1, hands for the least offensive option. Option 1. Option 2. Option 3. All right. Okay, that's about what I was thinking. All right, thank you all. I really appreciate.
Thank you, guys. I'm
Stay
not
if
trying
you'd like
walk
to.
you down.